What are you really here for? Ben demanded, still showing nothing but scorn. A payoff. You thought you'd extort from a big-hearted old lady because you know I have nothing now that I've paid a fine and lost my company. No! You'll come back when the baby is born. Then, he didn't seem to possess any compassion for the position she was in. But she laid her predicament bare anyway. I have nothing, Ben. I used the last of my savings to get here. I can't work. Not in this industry. She'd been waiting tables while staying on a friend's sofa, but couldn't bring her baby back to that tiny apartment. Her option was the slum she'd been raised in, or what she had come here prepared to do. So you are looking for a handout. Quelle surprise. I believe your grandmother was in the same boat, pun intended, when she came to America. She had been so touched when he had related the story of a young woman escaping unrest in Hungary by selling an earring given to her as an engagement promise, only to wind up in a strange country alone and pregnant. When she learned her lover had been killed, she sold the earring to a fellow immigrant who proposed marriage to the desperate single mother. Together, they had established a jewelry store that had become one of Manhattan's iconic destinations for the wealthy and discerning falling deeply in love and having 2 more children, including Ben's father. My grandmother didn't light a match on her lover's life and disappear. Ben scoffed. Were we lovers? Henrika challenged hotly. Because the last thing you said to me was that sleeping with me was a mistake and we couldn't keep doing it. She held his gaze, refusing to blink, and let her brimming tears fall. That's the real reason I left. I didn't have anything worth staying for. Did I? She had been fathoms deep in love with him when he had said, "We can't keep scurrying around." She had known it, but hadn't been able to bring herself to cut things off. Being rejected by him was a blow she hadn't seen coming. You said you didn't want to be accused of getting ahead by sleeping with me, he reminded. That had been true. After Vincent had cast doubt on her grades, she'd needed more than ever to be seen as succeeding on her own merit. But she had also been scrambling to save face. You said that we should pretend it hadn't happened. His fierce gaze dropped to her midsection. I didn't want to make presumptions about your feelings. She set her hand against the swell where the baby hadn't moved lately. I didn't want you to think I was trying to get ahead that way. And what am I supposed to think now? When you've cost me everything, but didn't even come here to see me. I thought the baby would be better off with your family, Henrique said in a small voice that begged for leniency. If you can raise it without your anger with me coloring things, then of course I'll relinquish it to you. Something broke inside him. It was tangled up with hurt and disbelief, and I didn't have anything worth staying for. But a marrow-deep belief in family had him asking with outrage, "Don't you care about our baby at all?" Of course I care. Her flare of mother bear fury was strangely reassuring, despite how charged and dangerous she became. Why the hell do you think I'm here? I don't understand you, he bit out. It was the understatement of the century. He didn't understand himself either. The idea of her handing him their child and walking away. He swallowed against the ache in the back of his throat. I've told you, I have nothing. She flung out a hand, voice raw. I won't be my mother cleaning houses and raising my child on stale bread, marrying a stranger because I'm tired of poverty, only to have him. She cut herself off, throat flexing, what Ben prompted. You don't care, Ben. She dismissed tightly. Will you give me a place to sleep? Please, I'll work under the table. Try not to cost you more than a bed and whatever doctor bills my pregnancy requires. The cynical side of him said there had to be a catch. But the prospective father and the lover who'd made that baby with her was appalled at how little she expected of him. I'll do a paternity test. Sign anything you want, she promised. A pang reverberated in his chest. He realized there were dark circles under her eyes and tension around her mouth. You're 5 months or so? She nodded. Everything is going well? Silence stretched. Her eyes welled with fresh tears, and her mouth trembled. She was pale and scared. There was no mistaking that was fear gripping her. Of course, she was terrified. This news was sending his own brain into all system alerts, trying to formulate a plan before he'd fully absorbed that he was going to be a father. He moved before he realized what he was doing. He needed to hold her. She needed to be held. No matter what had transpired, they were having a baby. She looked up with surprise as he closed in. Her breath hitched in a sob that held helplessness and apology, regret, and plea. As he closed his arms around her, the gaping darkness inside him began to heal closed. But even as he drew her in, she stiffened and gasped, a noise he thought was the beginning of a healthy dam break of a cry. It will be okay, he murmured. It might have been a lie. He had no idea, but he tried to comfort her, ran his hands across her back. She cried out again, stronger, and pressed her forearms against his chest. Let go, let go. He did, and she stood before him, head bowed into her hands, crying inconsolably, while his arms hung uselessly at his sides. For God's sake, Henrika, what did she want from him? Then she told him, voice so faint he barely heard it, but her words nearly cut him in two. I need a doctor, Ben. He caught me taking his mail and beat me. Ben had spent a lot of time with that tiny word lately. If he hadn't hired her, if he hadn't been so drawn to her, if he hadn't hiked out alone with her that day, if he hadn't sat next to her and said what should have remained unsaid, and if he had resisted the compulsion to taste her just once, perhaps he would still have his company. Perhaps he wouldn't be sitting next to her hospital bed waiting with suffocating fear for the scan the doctor had ordered. The baby's heartbeat was strong, and there wasn't any bleeding, which was very good news. But the bruises across Henrika's back were the ugliest, most terrifying thing he'd ever seen. He closed his eyes, the vision imprinted behind his eyelids for all time. If she hadn't gone to Vincent's, hadn't wanted so badly to prove her innocence. Ben, she said, soft and urgent. He snapped his eyes open and shot to his feet, leaning over her hand, tenderly brushing the hair back from her pale cheek. What's wrong? She was on her side, and he'd thought she was dozing, but she rolled onto her back with a small wince. She took his hand and pressed it to her middle. Something moved. Under her gown and under the warmth of her taut belly. He jerked his hand away on reflex, startled, then immediately felt foolish. But he hadn't been around a pregnant woman since his youngest cousin had been born 12 years ago. Henrika's smile fell away. I thought you would want to know the baby is moving. I do. He gently set his hand back in place. This time, he was disconcerted by a rush of emotion. Not just reassurance, but the stunning knowledge that his child was alive and moving and real. So tiny, the pressure was nothing more than a coin sitting in his hand, yet the weight of responsibility it thrust upon him was a mountain. And the swell of love injected into him was fierce and stinging and all-encompassing. He glanced into Henrika's liquid brown eyes and saw exactly what he was feeling. Relief, excitement, joy. If he hadn't kissed her that day, if she hadn't moaned with an anguished type of pleasure that exactly matched the hunger digging its claws into him, he might never have made love to her. If he'd had a condom on him, so many ifs that could have added up to a different reality today. He wouldn't be standing here, his hand under the warm drape of hers, their baby's fluttering movements, holding both of them wrapped with wonder. He quit trying to rearrange all those ifs into any pattern but the one he had already chosen. They had led him to this moment, and it was the most miraculous thing that had ever happened to him. A week later, Henrika was ensconced in a palatial penthouse overlooking both the Hudson and the East Rivers. All the exterior walls were windows, the floors were heated, and the refrigerator blended seamlessly into the banks of cupboards. A woman, both nurse and housekeeper, came and went. Her main duty seemed to be to keep Henrika off her feet. After a scan, Henrika had been kept in hospital overnight for observation, then released to bed rest until her next checkup. One of Ben's cousins, Rosie, who was also pregnant, had brought her here. She projected warmth and understanding, and Henrika instinctively took to her, not that she could show it. She was too confused. "My husband bought this as an investment," Rosie told her. "Use of it is part of Ben's compensation package." Victor asked him to lead up the American division, of what Henrika didn't ask, too overwhelmed. "I'm still not used to living like this either," Rosie said ruefully. "I offered Ben the use of the studio flat I'm giving up." She chuckled. "Where is Ben?" Rosie sobered. "Columbia. Tracking Vincent." "No, he's dangerous." Kane Gizzy's fiancé went with him. All of this. The roll of Rosie's hand encompassed the fraud and Ben's subsequent fall from grace. We've all been affected. When one of us faces trouble, we pull together. Ben will be in touch as soon as he can. Meanwhile, you rest. If you're feeling up to it, Grandmama would like to visit. All of Ben's family trickled through over the ensuing days. Ben's mother and sister were thrilled about the baby, his father pleased and proud. Rosie came to say goodbye when she left for Hungary, bringing Gisela, the leggy woman who'd loaned her hotel room that first night. Gisela had an update worth hearing. "I thought Kane was ruthless," she said with elevated brows. Once he realized Vincent was the one who made it look like Ben tried to dupe him, Kane put his investigators onto finding the proof that clears both of them. Vincent is financially annihilated, but that's not enough for Benny. Kane said he's sticking close to keep our dear steady, occasionally arrogant, but mostly good-natured cousin from murder charges. Gizzy Rosie admonished lightly. The women shared a look that reinforced the familial bond Henrika sensed between all of them, leaving Henrika wistful for something like it. The rest of the visit passed very pleasantly. Both women designed jewelry, so they all spoke the language of gems and metals. Henrika admitted that Ben had told her about the pair of earrings that briefly belonged to their grandmother. Rosie and Gizzy told her the truth. "Why are you sharing a secret like that?" Henrika breathed, stunned. They would trust her with it. "Your family," Rosie said simply. "Only if—" Henrika set a hand below her navel, encouraged to believe if she hadn't lost the baby by now, the pregnancy would go to term. But even if it did, she still planned to give the baby to Ben. He didn't want her. "Did you hear the part about Benny's need for revenge?" "Your family," Gisela assured her dryly. There had been a time in his late teens and early 20s when Ben had found his family to be cloying. He had longed to prove himself, and despite the advantaged start they had given him, he thought he'd succeeded very well on his own merit. When he had first partnered with Kane, he had considered them equals. Things had turned contentious when Ben's samples had turned sour, and Ben had wanted to punch the man in the face for going after Gizzy. Smart and independent as Gizzy was in his head, she was still a naive 10-year-old, given to believing romantic notions about earrings and eternal love. Kane had fallen in love with Gizzy, though, and Ben had taken the heat for the fraud. He and Kane had been in a cold war of sorts for Gizzy's sake. and would have avoided each other indefinitely if Kane hadn't gone after Vincent with him. Kane had been as invested in bringing down Vincent as Ben was, but Ben hadn't expected the man to shadow him into the jungle and counsel him so earnestly against cold-blooded murder. "Your baby needs a father. Tell the authorities and let's get home to our women." Ben hadn't wanted to settle for merely seeing Vincent arrested. At least assault charges were added to the insider trading and fraud, though. Now, Ben was back in New York exhausted and referencing an email from Victor to find his new address, while Kane's offer of startup capital for a reboot of Barcy Minerals was still ringing in his head. His upended life was righting itself. His family no longer faced dire straits. He could hold his head high again, even go back to a version of his old life. There would be no off-grid explorations for rare metals, however. Not with a baby in tow. He had always seen himself as the type of parent who might have 1 or 2 business trips a year, but otherwise wanted to be involved daily with his children. He had imagined his wife would be the same. "I didn't have anything worth staying for." He had been sleeping with an employee. That had definitely needed to end. At the time, he had even understood her desire to avoid being seen as getting ahead through any means other than her genuinely excellent work. When he thought back on it now, he remembered her suggesting they wait until the job was finished and inviting him to get in touch if he wanted to pursue their relationship again. He had forgotten that when he returned to the site concerned by reports of wildly different sampling and learned she had fled. The betrayal at that point had been so deep he was sickened. He'd gone after her, but unlike Vincent, when Henrika disappeared, she did it right. Had she run again? The penthouse was silent, the master bedroom empty. He swore wearily and had a much-needed shower. He would have fallen into bed, but couldn't recall when he had last eaten. As he walked down the hall in a towel, he glanced into the guest room and halted. There she was, fast asleep under a throw. Her auburn hair spilled across her pale cheek. She had one hand tucked under the pillow, the other curled beneath her chin. The emotion that moved in him had him swallowing and patting softly across to stand over her. He had never seen her sleep. They'd always made love in the dark, biting back their cries of pleasure to hide their affair. He had always left before light guilty and regretful, hating himself for what felt like a weakness because he couldn't seem to resist her. Damn, she looked innocent. Because she was innocent. She'd been a virgin. She hadn't betrayed him. He sank onto the edge of the mattress, humbled. Henriqua woke with a start to find Ben sitting next to her. The freshly showered scent of him engulfed her, sending a rush of sensual awareness through her. Her sharp reaction, inescapable and undisguisable, caused a domino effect of panic and insecurity. Confusion. She had been longing for him to come back to New York. She'd been bereft and uncertain, desperate to know what was going on. Part of her thrilled to see him, but a fresh anguish accosted her because she understood now that it didn't matter what had happened with Vincent. She still had to give up her baby. Ben still didn't love her. "I didn't mean to wake you." He drew the blanket higher on her shoulder. "How are you? How is baby?" "Fine. I had a checkup this morning. I was really tired when I got Ho back." She swallowed. "Vincent?" "In jail. Staying there. Forget about him." Small comfort, but she murmured, "Thank you." "Did he hurt your mother?" he asked in a dour voice. "I've been wondering that myself, thinking I should have tried harder to see her. He got in the way. Then she got sick, and she threw her arm over her eyes, sniffed back tears. Can we not talk about that?" "Another time." His hand settled on her thickened middle. "I'm glad the baby is okay." "Me too." She tentatively let her hand settle over his while still hiding behind her other arm. His hand shifted away, slid beneath her. He gathered her, drew her into his lap, and held her against his bare chest. She turned her face into his skin, the feel of him too acutely sweet to bear. Tears slid out of her clenched eyes. "I'm sorry, Ben. I didn't know he was capable of all that. I'm so sorry." "Shh. It's done. Behind us." "No, it isn't, and never will be. You had to pay those fines and lost your business." "I'll recover. We'll be fine." She drew back and wiped her cheeks, tried to think a clear thought, but kept welling up, unable to bear giving up her baby. What choice did she have, though? "Will you let me see her sometimes?" "At the scan today, they said she's a girl." The breath rushed out of him and his arms crushed her gently. "How are your ribs?" he asked, suddenly loosening his grip. "I'm okay." He nearly crushed the life out of her. A girl. It didn't matter to me either way, so I don't know why I feel like I won the lottery. "We're having a little girl, Ricky." She hadn't heard that nickname since their last night together in Indonesia. She smiled sadly and forced him to release her, not wanting to believe this meant anything more than a moment of forgetfulness on his part. She moved onto the bed beside him. "Just promise me that if she wants to go into science, you'll support her. You'll be setting an example for her. Henriqua." He caught her elbow, keeping her sitting even as she convulsively tried to stand, and put distance between them. "We're getting married and raising her together." "No, Ben. I told you the other night. I won't marry a man just to support me. More than ever, I realize what a mistake that can become." Ben sat back stunned, aching like he'd taken a kick to the stomach. He wished he'd had the sense to dress before coming in here. He'd never felt so naked in his life. "Do you not want to raise her? Is that it?" Were her feelings toward him interfering with her ability to bond with the baby she carried? "Of course I want my child. Do you listen at all?" "Yes, I do," he bit out. "I heard you loud and clear in Indonesia when you said your career meant everything to you, and you didn't want anyone thinking you were trying to get ahead by sleeping with the boss. You're the one who wanted to end it, Henriqua. I was going to suggest we make changes so you could travel with me and we could have a relationship in the open." "What?" She staggered a little and nervously smoothed her blue sweater over her bump. Black pants hugged her hips and thighs, making the most of her lush bottom and curvy hips. How did she get more beautiful every single time he looked at her? "When you said that about your career," his chest still felt tight, recalling it. He had to stand, unable to take her looking down on him. He paced off a few restless steps, catching at his towel before it slid off his hips. "I didn't know what to think. I knew you were right. I never should have slept with an employee." He ran his hand over his damp hair. "And it didn't sound as though you were as invested as I was," he admitted baldly. "I was trying to spare myself from falling into unrequited love. I thought you were right to suggest time apart to see how we really felt." Her face contorted with anguish, and she showed him her profile. "And that's the other reason we had to end it," she choked. "You weren't in love and didn't want to be." "I didn't have a choice," he shot back. Then, because he knew the time for anything but the stark truth was long past, he admitted, "Time apart didn't work, Henrica. I fell anyway. Hard." She snapped her head around, scanned his expression. Her mouth trembled. "Don't lie to me. I couldn't bear it." "Why would I lie?" "Because I'm having your baby. I know how much family means to you, and I don't want." "Stop telling me what you don't want. Tell me what you do want, not what you're willing to settle for. Not that you'll give me our baby because you think that's best for her. You could have offered me our baby without fetching papers that damn near got you both killed." His blood boiled anew as he thought of it. "You weren't just trying to clear your name. You were trying to clear mine. Why? She bit her lips and shook her head, expression helpless. Say it, Henriqua. I need to hear it. Tell me you love me. I do. She couldn't hold it in any longer. I love you so much. But She was on her back on the mattress, his athletic frame caging her beneath him. I love you too. He ground out, expression fierce with triumph, yet so tender he brought tears to her eyes. Don't cry. It was command and plea. Enough with hurting each other. I never meant to. She cupped his jaw in her palm. I'm not used to relying on anyone, on having someone I can rely on. I didn't think we had enough to build on or trust in. I'm not anything, Ben. Even the degree I worked so hard for is useless now. It's not. We'll come back to your opportunities when you're not cooking a baby. I promise you there will be plenty because you are amazing, Henriqua. Smart and brave and so independent it's a tiny bit annoying for a man who was raised to hold doors and carry a woman's bags for her. She pursed her mouth around a smile that was trying to take hold, afraid to believe he was really saying these wonderful things. This baby is accelerating what would have happened naturally if things hadn't gone off the rails. When you asked me if I hated you, I thought I should. But that's the moment I knew I loved you. Genuinely loved you. Because I couldn't bring myself to call the police or anyone else. I just wanted you back in my life. That's how I felt when I realized I was pregnant. I wanted to forget everything that had happened and just tell you. Her mouth wobbled. I was sure you'd be happy. I am. I'm astounded and excited and so smug. Like we did it on purpose after trying our hardest. She chuckled and touched her mouth to his. We can still, go through the motions of trying. His expression sobered, and he drew back slightly. I'm sorry I didn't realize immediately that you were innocent. Vincent went to great lengths to make me look guilty. I don't blame you, Ben. Thank you. I love you. He came back to their kiss with proper intention. The spark was still alive between them, flaring quickly out of control the way it always did. They kissed passionately, moaned freely. He swept his tongue into her mouth, and she dragged his towel away, filling her hands with every inch of his naked butt, while he growled in frustration at all the clothes she was still wearing. They laughed and tussled and caressed, and got down to the serious business of pleasuring each other. Wringing moments of near-shattering pleasure from each other. When the anticipation became too much to bear, he tenderly slid into her, both of them releasing a long groan of joyous reunion. You said we were meeting some of your family. Do they live above the shop? Henriqua hung back to glance at the narrow windows above the blue awning that read Barcy on 5th in silver lettering. When they were raising my father and my aunts, my grandparents lived up there. Now it's workspace for designers. Rosie and Geezy are both leaving, so I imagine my father will bring in some new blood. A bell chimed as they entered. Ben's sister greeted them with a warm hug. Dad's in the safe with Grandmama. I'll tell them you're here. She disappeared. I came here after school every day when I was young, Ben told her. My first job was polishing the fronts of the cases. Come here. It's all so beautiful. Henriqua was in awe as she perused the icy sparkle and shots of emerald and amethyst amid gold and platinum. Which one do you like? He asked, gazing on her with the most tender expression she'd ever seen. I can't propose properly until we have a ring. Henriqua's heart began to beat faster. That's not Benjamin, his grandmother said, coming out from the back of the shop. I have something for you? She pressed something into his palm as she kissed his cheek. He seemed taken aback as he looked at the ring and band she'd given him. "This is the set Grandpapa made for you. They've been in the safe since I came out of hospital last year. I want you to have them. Your father made your mother's set, but your talents lie in other directions." She teased him as she scrubbed her thumb on his cheek, erasing her lipstick. "You carry his name. It's right that you have them." "I don't know what to say, except—" He turned to Enriqua. "You're the love of my life, Enriqua. Will you marry me?" She had her hand slapped across her mouth, incapable of doing anything but standing there moved with tears in her eyes. "I feel as though I've done nothing but cry lately," she managed to choke out. "I would be so honored to wear them, but please realize these aren't rings you're giving me. Your big, loving family is the kind I've wanted all my life. I know you wouldn't offer that lightly, Ben." "I would not," he agreed and cupped her jaw. "In fact, only the very best people are chosen to join us. Marry me and be one of us." "That would also be my honor." He threaded the diamond solitaire onto her finger. It was too pretty to be modest, too classic to be showy. It was a timeless statement of love, one that fit perfectly and felt exactly right. As they kissed, she heard Estibarsi sniff and say to Ben's father, "Not the first proposal this store has seen, but definitely one of the most touching." 5 years later, "This might be the dumbest idea I've ever had," Ben warned Henriqua when he suggested taking the kids to Alaska for the summer. At 4 and 3, Louisa, who was named for Henrica's mother, and Ben, as Louisa, had tagged her younger brother, were a handful. Henriqua went along with it mostly because she was as stir-crazy to be in the field as he was. They each managed a few short trips a year on behalf of KVB Minerals, the exploration company Ben had established in partnership with Kane and Victor. But they rarely went away together and had never taken the children. Henriqua actually headed KVB because Ben was making too much money for Victor. Every time he tried to quit so he could devote more time to exploration, Victor gave him a raise and talked him into 1 more year. Expecting to spend more time parenting than sampling, they brought a full field team with them, but the kids were surprisingly game for long walks over terrain where glaciers had receded and human feet had never trod. Today, they'd found their way to the shoreline of a glacial lake of silty blue. Ben, if you go in that water, I'm taking you straight back to camp to dry off and you're staying there," Ben warned. The kid was like a Labrador retriever, magnetically drawn to water, and didn't care if it was only a few degrees above freezing. "Can I pan?" Louisa asked, mirroring her mother as Henriqua crouched to sift sand through her fingers. Ben's heart wanted to burst whenever he saw his wife and his children. Whether it was their melted chocolate eyes, or their inquisitive tactile natures, or even their stubborn streaks of independence, panning would get them all soaked for sure. But Ben said, "It's on my pack." He stepped away for 1 second, his antennae already telling him it was a mistake to turn his back on. "Ben Bun, no," Louisa cried, even as little splooshes sounded. Ben was up to his knees, straightening with a rock in his hand, scowling as he said, "It's cold." "It is," Henriqua said, already on him, wrinkling her nose at the 1 foot she'd stepped into the lake to scoop Ben out of it. "We'll all go back," she said, exchanging a fatalistic look with Ben as she set their son on his feet. Ben is right, Mommy. It's gold," Louisa said. "What? Oh." Ben glanced at the feeling-sized nugget in the boy's still dripping hand and almost said a word that shouldn't be said in front of children. "Trow it?" Ben started to pitch it back into the water. "No," Henriqua cried, grabbing his hand and making the boy tear up at being shouted at. I'm sorry," she said, hugging him and laughing, and trying to make up with him with loving kisses as she handed the nugget to Ben. The weight was unmistakable. "You put that there for him to find?" Ben teased his wife. "I did not." She shot him a scolding look while keeping her arms wrapped tight around their son. Next time, show me first and ask me to get it, Ben said, squatting to kiss Ben's forehead. We still have to go back to camp for dry clothes, but it was a good find. And guess what? You get to dig some sand first. He handed the kids shovels and empty sample bags, then stood to exchange an incredulous look with his wife. People spend their whole lives prospecting, and our kid is a human dowsing rod. Got it from both sides, it would seem. For the record, this was the best idea you've ever had. She looped her arms around his waist and leaned on him, mouth tilted up for a kiss. I was thinking hiring you was, but I'll take it. He kissed her smile with his own.